There's a thin line between a prank that's hilarious and one that becomes a disaster. But the people in today's video didn't just cross the line. These are pranks so twisted, they turned deadly.
From a neighbor whose idea of a prank is straight up sawing through a beam while someone sleeps, to an ammonia prank that goes wrong, creating a recipe for disaster no one was ready for. It was July 9th, 2022, in a quiet residential neighborhood outside Asheville, North Carolina, where the fence line separating two backyards had already settled every legal argument it was going to settle, except for the one that mattered. Desmond Reyes was 34 and worked as an HVAC technician for a regional service company. Months earlier, he had won a small claims judgment against his 36-year-old neighbor, Jake Hammond, over a property line dispute involving a fence. Jake had built 8 inches onto Desmond's side. Desmond had documentation, photos, and a survey. He didn't gloat about the win. He simply moved on. But honestly, that quiet dignity probably made Jake even angrier. People like that can't stand when you don't feed their rage. Jake's resentment didn't end with the ruling. Weeks later, he slipped into Desmond's yard at night and partially sawed through a primary deck support beam, leaving it strong enough to appear stable. The aftermath later concluded he intended to damage the deck and frighten Desmond, never expecting anyone to be trapped beneath it when it failed. I find that distinction almost worse. It means someone calculated harm and simply guessed wrong about how much. That Saturday, Desmond hosted a small cookout. 2 co-workers, Benny Lopez and Nathan Polanski, stood near the grill while Desmond, full from lunch, climbed into the hammock to nap. Nobody inspected the beam. Nobody had reason to. The deck had held his weight 100 times before. That's the quiet cruelty of sabotage. Like this, it doesn't announce itself until the exact wrong moment. The already weakened support beam, carrying the weight of several people moving across the deck throughout the afternoon, finally failed as Desmond settled into the hammock, adding one last shifting load to the structure. A 6 by 8 foot section of decking failed all at once. Joists, railing, and support posts pulled downward in a single collapsing motion. Benny, mid-sentence about burgers, turned at the crack of splintering wood and later described the deck folding like a card table. Desmond went down with the hammock directly beneath the falling structure. The support beam landed across his chest and pelvis, pinning him against the concrete patio below. Think about that. 1 second he's dozing off, the next he's trapped under his own home. Benny and Nathan reached him within seconds. They tried lifting the beam, but it had locked against the second broken beam, wedged in a way that made it immovable without tools. Nathan later said he could hear Desmond's breathing change, shallow, then irregular, before it stopped being audible at all. Benny called 911 immediately.
Can you imagine being there? Imagine being so fast in the response, and yet none of it was enough because the damage had already been done.
By the time paramedics arrived, Desmond was unresponsive, his chest unable to expand under the weight pressing down on it. He was pronounced dead a short time later at the hospital. The cause of death, in plain terms, was crush asphyxia. The collapse was first ruled accidental until a structural engineer found clean saw cuts beneath the broken beam. After preserving the evidence, police obtained security footage showing Jake entering Desmond's backyard days before the cookout. He was later convicted of second-degree murder and felony property damage, and Desmond's family also filed a wrongful death lawsuit that ended with a civil judgment awarding them financial damage. You know what gets me? Even with that conviction and that money, they'll never get back what really mattered. A weaponized fence dispute is petty, but we're just getting started. The next revenge combines a seemingly prank with the freeway. It was the 7th of October, 2016 in Topeka, Kansas. Renata Fitzgerald's biggest concern was the usual Friday rush. She had no way of knowing that the small, deliberate act of sabotage performed in her driveway the night before was about to turn a 9-mile drive into a death sentence. Renata was 41 and worked as a payroll clerk at a mid-sized trucking company on the east side of the city. She had been with the company for 9 years and had recently been promoted into a coordinator role, a position another employee had also applied for and did not get. Renata was known around the office as thorough, a little blunt, and consistent in her routines. I've worked with people like that. The ones who don't realize that being blunt can make enemies just as fast as being cruel. She left home every weekday at 7:40 in the morning, drove the same 9 miles to work, and used her wipers the same way most drivers do, without thinking about it.
What Renata did not know was that the night before, her passed-over co-worker had gone into her driveway and emptied a mixture of dish soap and a thin silicone water repellent into her windshield washer reservoir.
Renata pulled onto Interstate 70, heading east directly into a low autumn sun that commuters on that stretch dealt with every clear morning. It could be bug residue or something else that stuck on her windshield that made her do what she had done hundreds of times before she hit the wiper fluid. The first pass of the wipers only spread the soap and repellent mixture into a thick smear across her windshield. Driving straight into the low morning sun made the streaks even harder to see through, and every additional spray only made the visibility worse. By the time she realized how bad it had become, she was already traveling at highway speed with only seconds to react. I've driven into low sun before it's bad enough clean, so I can only imagine that panic when every swipe made it worse. A trucker in the adjacent lane noticed her sedan drifting before she did, or at least before her correction suggested she had. Her car eased across one lane, then a second. The kind of slow lateral drift that reads as someone searching for the shoulder by feel rather than sight. He said later that he slowed and moved right, expecting her to correct. She did not.
This is the part where I have to remind myself that 65 miles an hour does not leave room for someone to recalibrate blind.
The sedan struck the guardrail at the Wanamaker overpass at highway speed. The impact did not stop the car, it launched it. Witnesses on the overpass and the trucker behind her both described the vehicle rotating through a single flip before clearing the rail entirely and dropping to the frontage road roughly 30 feet below. That's 3 stories, and she had no chance from the moment she hit that lever. The trucker pulled over immediately and called it in. Renata was already gone by the time EMS reached her. The cause of death recorded plainly as blunt trauma from the fall.
In the weeks after, her co-worker confessed to the prank, apparently unprompted, telling investigators she never expected the wipers to cause an accident, only embarrassment.
Renata's family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the co-worker, and the case was resolved through a confidential civil settlement. Honestly, I just think that settlement says more about how we handle tragedies than about guilt. It's clean, it's quiet, and it leaves us all just shrugging and moving on, which honestly feels weirdly anticlimactic for something that ended a life. A confession over dish soap was one thing, but our next prank wasn't going to end with anyone owning up so easily. It was March 14, 2021. A warehouse on the edge of Bhiwandi's textile district in India had sat empty for 6 years, its power disconnected. Nobody driving past that evening would have guessed the building was about to become the last place 2 teenagers ever stood. Muhammad Arma'an Sheikh was 19, a transfer student who had moved to the area only 8 months earlier. He had a habit of tagging along to things rather than organizing them himself. Rohit Jadhav, 18, was the younger cousin of one of the boys involved in a brewing rivalry over a girl, and he had come that night mostly because his cousin asked him to. Neither boy had any real stake in the conflict driving the evening. The plan, as police later reconstructed it, belonged to 3 older teenagers upset that a girl had left one of them for a boy outside their group. According to the statements gathered in the aftermath, rather than a confrontation, they decided to lure the rival and his friends into the abandoned warehouse for a late-night party, then seal both marked emergency exits with industrial epoxy bonding, the latch areas and door frames shut, so the group would be trapped inside until morning. It reads now like something engineered by people who never once considered fire. By midnight, roughly 30 teenagers had gathered inside, lighting the space with candles and a diesel-powered work light dragged in from someone's garage. There was music from a phone speaker, some drinking, the ordinary noise of kids who thought they were getting away with something. Nobody checked the exits beforehand.
I keep asking myself, if I weren't there, would I have checked those doors?
Probably not. And that terrifying thought lodges right in my throat every time I reread that line. Around 1 in the morning, someone knocked over a candle near a stack of old fabric scraps and cardboard packing material piled in a corner, leftover debris from the warehouse's working days. The fabric caught almost immediately. Smoke banked across the low ceiling within minutes, thick and fast, in a way that made the room feel smaller than it was. Kids ran for the 2 marked exits first, out of instinct. Both doors held firm despite shoulder checks and repeated kicks. The epoxy had bonded the latches and door frames tightly enough that, in the panic and confusion, nobody could force them open before the fire spread. A narrow side-loading chute offered the only other way out, its opening only about 30 inches wide, forcing everyone to squeeze through one at a time. Mohammed Arman and Rohit, both larger build than most of the group, were pushed backward in the crush toward the sealed doors, while smaller kids squeezed through the chute ahead of them. One girl, Pooja Patil, was the last through. She looked back before dropping into the yard outside and saw both boys collapse near the door, no longer moving. I can't imagine carrying that image for the rest of my life, and she didn't even know them well. A security guard at a nearby transport yard noticed the smoke and called the local fire control room at about 1:15. Fire engines arrived within roughly 10 minutes, but by then, the interior was fully involved. Mohammed Arman and Rohit were recovered afterward, already dead. Initially, it was framed locally as a party gone wrong. However, the fire probe later revealed industrial epoxy on both exit doors, and texts confirmed 3 teens had planned the prank to trap their rival overnight. Police eventually charged the 3 with offenses amounting to culpable homicide.
It's really sad knowing that Arman and Rohit weren't even in the love triangle. They were just plus ones. Collateral damage from a casual come along.
Now our next prank was even more personal. One man's grudge, hidden in a single sharpened cut, waiting 14 stories up for gravity to finish the job. It was March 7, 2014 in Singapore. On that morning, Anton Reyes was just a man with a job to do. A man who had made an honest decision to speak up, unaware that a silent, unseen compromise was waiting for him. Anton was 29, a licensed electrician from the Philippines, working overseas on a 2-year contract, sending most of his pay home and picking up shifts whenever the foreman offered them. A few weeks earlier, he had reported his 28-year-old co-worker, Aaron Tan, for showing up to a shift visibly drunk, a decision that cost him nothing at the time but a few cold looks in the break area. According to other co-workers who were close to Anton, he probably didn't think much of those looks. He had made the report because a drunk man on a scaffold floor is a hazard to everyone, not just himself. And they said that Anton had never been someone who stayed quiet to keep the peace.
I respect that about him. Most people would have looked the other way, but he actually had the spine to do the right thing.
Was that Aaron had, sometime before the day's shift, taken a utility knife to the outer webbing of Anton's secondary lanyard, cutting it partway through beneath the surface layer, careful enough that a routine visual inspection and tug test would find nothing wrong. Anton clipped in on the 6th floor, as he did every day, running conduit above a corridor, stripped to bare metal framing. He probably even gave the lanyard its standard pull, and it held. Midday, needing to reach a junction box, he stepped onto a scaffold plank that likely appeared fully seated but had not been properly secured after being repositioned.
I can picture him doing that routine check, trusting his gear, not realizing the guy who hated him had already signed his death warrant.
The plank rotated beneath Anton and dropped away. He fell about 14 feet before his lanyard caught as designed. but the deliberately weakened webbing failed almost instantly, sending him another 18 feet onto the concrete below. That split second of hope makes me sick. Imagine thinking you're saved, only for a coward's blade to steal that from you. Floor worker Nimesh saw the lanyard catch and then fail. Rushed over within seconds, found Anton unconscious with severe head trauma, and radioed the site supervisor immediately. Paramedics arrived within minutes and began resuscitation on site, but Anton was ultimately pronounced dead at the scene. All that training, all those safety protocols, and he still died because one person chose spite over decency. It's infuriating. Investigators found the lanyard had been partially cut with a blade, ruling out a defect. Security footage, witness statements, and matching fibers on a utility knife tied Aaron to the sabotage, and he eventually admitted cutting it, claiming he only meant to scare Anton and damage his equipment, never expecting the lanyard to fail during a real fall. I don't think I'd take his word for it. Aaron was charged with an offense related to causing Anton's death under Singapore law. The contractor was separately cited for the unsecured plank that started the fall in the first place, a detail that, if fixed, might have made the sabotage irrelevant entirely.
Sadly, there is no clean lesson here. A man did his job correctly by reporting a real hazard honestly, and someone decided that it was worth sabotaging his equipment.
The plank should have been secured and the lanyard should have held. Neither of those facts brings Anton home. A safety violation report cost one man his life on a Singapore scaffold. But our next act of petty revenge didn't need 14 feet of empty air, just a single breath. It was October 4th, 2016, in a quiet residential stretch of Spokane, Washington, where a property line disagreement over an overgrown hedge had already curdled into something neither man would admit was personal anymore. Marlo Petranek was 52, a postal worker who had spent 19 years on the same delivery route. He had lived with severe asthma for most of his adult life, a condition his co-workers knew well because he carried two inhalers, one in his bag and one in the glove compartment, and never left home without checking both. His only real conflict was with his 43-year-old neighbor, Brian Sutton, who lived next door, a slow simmering dispute over a hedge that had grown past the property line. You probably know that kind of disagreement that escalates through passive gestures rather than confrontation. I think what strikes me most about disputes like this is how rarely they stay contained to what they're supposedly about. The hedge was never really the issue. It was a stand-in for years of low-grade resentment neither man wanted to name directly. Brian, apparently frustrated after another exchange about the hedge, decided on something he later called a prank. Before dawn, he approached Marlo's parked car and poured a concentrated deer repellent solution into the exterior air intake below the windshield cowl, the kind of product designed to smell like rotting eggs to keep animals away from gardens. He said that he believed the worst outcome would be a ruined commute, a bad smell Marlo would have to sit with for 20 minutes. Marlo left for work the next morning, as he always did. The drive to the regional sorting facility took about 20 minutes, and he probably turned the fan on high once the cabin started to feel stuffy. Within a mile, the odor became impossible to ignore. It's hard for me not to picture that moment, sitting in heavy morning traffic, confused about where a smell that strong could possibly be coming from, assuming maybe a skunk, maybe something in the engine. With vehicles surrounding him and nowhere safe to pull over immediately, he kept driving, hoping he could make it to a safer place to stop. According to investigations, by the second mile, his breathing must have grown audibly, labored, as the fumes continued circulating through the cabin. Denise Parsons was stopped behind him at a red light when she noticed his car begin to drift. She said afterward that it didn't look violent at first, more like inattention, the car easing left instead of holding its lane. Now apparently, that was because Marlo was reaching toward the passenger seat, toward the bag where his inhaler sat, and the motion pulled his hands and attention away from the wheel at the exact moment his airway was tightening. The car drifted through the intersection, crossed the opposite lane, climbed the curb, and struck a retaining wall head-on at a speed that did not look from behind like something that should have killed anyone. Denise ran to the car. Marlo was slumped against the wheel, unresponsive and not breathing normally. She began CPR immediately, yelling for someone nearby to call 911. Paramedics arrived in about 8 minutes, but Marlo had already gone into respiratory failure from the severe asthma attack, leading to hypoxia and cardiac arrest. He could not be revived. The coroner ruled the cause of death was complications of a severe asthma attack triggered by an airway irritant, with the crash injuries deemed secondary and non-fatal. Investigators traced the source to animal repellent poured into the car's intake vent, and after security footage and purchase records tied the sabotage to his 43-year-old neighbor, Brian Sutton, he confessed. Brian was later charged with tampering with a motor vehicle. He was ultimately sentenced to 12 years in prison for the prank that ended Marlo's life.
To be fair, I don't think he set out to kill anyone. I think he wanted to win an argument about a hedge and never once considered what he was pouring into another person's lungs.
Now, if Marlo's death began with a neighborhood grudge, the next started inside an apartment shared by two people who thought they knew each other. It was September 2, 2012, in a college town in south central Indiana. A mild heart condition and a roommate's escalating resentment, two separate, unremarkable threats, were about to converge in a weight room. Idris Callahan was 20 years old, a sophomore studying business, mostly known around his dorm for being 3 months behind on rent split with his roommate. They said that he wasn't cruel about it, just chronically disorganized. He kept a strict leg day routine every Tuesday and Thursday, always with a scoop of pre-workout mixed into a plastic shaker bottle he left on the kitchen counter overnight. His roommate had reached the point where irritation curdled into something meaner. He dumped a large amount of concentrated sodium phosphate laxative into the shaker the night before, expecting nothing worse than a frantic sprint to a bathroom mid-workout. I genuinely cannot fathom how anyone thinks poisoning someone's drink is ever a fair or funny way to settle a score. Now, what he didn't know is that Idris had a heart condition. Apparently, Idris mentioned once, almost as a throwaway line to a friend, that a doctor had flagged a mild heart arrhythmia during a routine physical. Nothing that changed his life, nothing he thought about again.
And even if the roommate knew about it, I still don't think he would attribute the laxative prank to something that would have triggered Idris' condition.
The next afternoon, Idris grabbed the bottle, checked into the rec center, and powered through his usual routine. Over the next hour, he developed worsening stomach cramps and signs of dehydration, but assumed it was just a bad batch of pre-workout. Habit won out, and despite feeling noticeably weaker, he pushed through a few more sets anyway. By the time he lay back on a bench, set inside a power rack with safety catches for his next set, sweat had soaked through his shirt in a way that didn't match the room temperature. His face had gone pale, almost gray, under the gym lighting. I get sick to my stomach imagining him sitting there, completely unaware that his body was actively failing him. He racked the bar, or tried to, his arms locked halfway through the lift, the bar tilting before dropping onto the safety catches with a metallic clang that made a few heads turn. Then his body went rigid, his back arching slightly off the bench, and he slid sideways off the pad and hit the rubber flooring. 2 benches over, another gym goer cushioned Idris's fall, checked his shallow breathing, and called for help while immediately beginning loud, counted chest compressions. Gym staff alerted EMS within a minute as bewildered onlookers backed into a loose half circle. Campus Emergency Medical Services arrived within 6 minutes, took over resuscitation, and rushed Idris to the hospital, but he never regained consciousness. He was pronounced dead after a fatal cardiac arrhythmia triggered by severe electrolyte disturbances and dehydration, and no foul play was initially suspected. For 2 months, the death was ruled a private medical tragedy until his roommate, unable to carry the guilt any further, admitted he'd spiked the drink as a prank that was never meant to kill anyone. He later pleaded guilty to reckless homicide and was sentenced to several years in prison. Now, what the roommate did was obviously wrong, and it's a reminder of how quickly petty resentment can spiral into irreversible consequences when someone decides to get even instead of dealing with a problem directly. A spiked drink turned a routine leg day into a fatal gamble against a heart nobody knew was ticking. Our next story swaps sweat for pipes, proving that revenge doesn't need a target to be lethal. It was October 21st, 2014, in a narrow, 3-story rental building in Providence, Rhode Island, a building where two strangers were about to be linked in a way neither could have imagined. Solveig Oze was 38, a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm downtown. Known among co-workers for being meticulous to the point of tedium, she reconciled her own checkbook by hand, even though she managed spreadsheets for a living. She'd lived in the upstairs unit for 6 years and had a habit of calling the landlord and occasionally the police about noise from downstairs. Her downstairs neighbor, Ruben Achterberg, 45, worked as a locksmith and had been written up twice by their building manager after Solveig's complaints. That evening, still irritated over the most recent complaint, Ruben poured most of a bottle of industrial-strength ammonia down his bathroom sink. His reasoning, according to text messages he sent a friend afterward, was that the smell would rise through the shared line and irritate Solveig without her ever knowing why.
It's a strange kind of logic, punishing someone through plumbing instead of just knocking on their door. But I understand the impulse to fight quietly instead of directly.
However, he had no way of knowing their building's drain line was shared or that Solveig's own bathroom sink trap had gone bone dry after the sink had sat largely unused for months. Solveig, unrelated to any of this, was dealing with a slow-draining sink that had annoyed her for 2 weeks. She'd already tried a plunger. That night, she poured concentrated bleach down the same drain, standing over it the way people do, waiting to hear the water start moving again. She had no reason to think about what might already be lingering in the dry drain opening below her. And honestly, most people wouldn't. It's the kind of thing you only learn about after it kills somebody. Bleach met ammonia vapor and residue in her drain, creating invisible chloramine gas. With a dry trap and poor ventilation, the gas rose straight into her face as she leaned over the sink. The fumes hit instantly, coughing so violent neighbors heard it, eyes and throat burning within seconds. No warning, no mild phase, no chance to hold her breath, just immediate chemical hell. I'm both amazed and horrified that something as mundane as bleach and ammonia turned into a weapon without anyone pulling a trigger. She stumbled backward out of the bathroom, one hand on the doorframe, and made it into the hallway before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, gasping, unable to get a full breath in. Downstairs, Ruben caught an acrid, sharp smell from the sink. He went upstairs expecting a minor nuisance. Instead, he found Solveig on the hallway floor, barely conscious, breathing shallow, one hand at her collar. He didn't know he had caused it. He called 911, shouting by his own account. Paramedics arrived in 10 minutes, gave oxygen, and transported her. Over 2 days, she declined into respiratory failure and died. The coroner stated plainly, chemical burns to her lungs from gas, her body unable to sustain oxygen exchange. The investigation that followed focused on the building's plumbing layout and reconstructed the sequence of events through Ruben's ammonia purchase, his text messages about the smell, witness interviews, and the empty container found in his trash, although he initially denied using any chemicals. Prosecutors charged him with involuntary manslaughter and reckless endangerment, and he was later convicted.
Like the previous stories, this isn't about malice or evil. It's about thoughtless decisions that snowballed into a fatal tragedy.